everyone. So I'm Maggie Williams. What I do is best summarised as writing about pensions for magazines and schemes and for pension providers as well. And my specialist subject this afternoon is how important is member engagement. So before we actually talk about how important it is, we probably better define what it is. And engagement is one of those slightly sort of lump of putty words that people make all sorts of different definitions in different kind of ways with it. So I thought I'd try and come up with a definitive definition that we could work with today. So I had a brainstorm with myself, which was not terribly successful. Pensions love, I kind of felt wasn't really summing it up. So I did what everyone does when they need a definition of something. I looked at Google. So there we go. Engagement rings, not really what we're looking for. Engagement definition. Engagement definition marketing. I thought, yes, that's the sort of thing we're looking at with marketing to people with this. So I don't know if anyone in here would classify themselves as an engagement marketer, but this was engagement marketing is sometimes called experiential marketing, or event marketing, or on-ground marketing, or live marketing, or participation marketing, or special event, and I decided to give up on that particular one. So I thought, okay, let's go back again. What's the definition of engagement for business? Employee engagement is the emotional commitment the employer has to the organisation and its goals. This emotional commitment means engaged employees actually care about their work and their company. And when employees care, when they are engaged, they use discretionary effort. Okay, might be useful. We'll come back to that. So I had a look, okay, let's do pensions. Let's go for it. Definition of pensions engagement. Came through loads of articles about how to do it, but nothing that actually defined what that lump of putty meant when it came to pensions. So I thought, right, I'll go back to the one I quite liked about the business. I'll put in some of the stuff from my post-it notes, and I came up with this, which, for the purposes of this presentation, is my particular lump of putty shaped for this. So employee engagement with pensions is the emotional commitment the employee has to their retirement savings and their financial goals. This commitment means engaged employees actually care about their pension and their long-term financial future. When they care, when they are engaged, they value their savings and are more likely to contribute more over the course of their working lives. So there's quite a lot of caveats in there, quite a lot of get-out clauses, but perhaps for today, at least for this room, it's a definition that we can work with of what we mean by engagement. So, questions that come out of that actually form this presentation. Are employees emotionally committed to their finances, and what part do employers play within that? Do employees care about their financial future, and does that translate into more pension savings over the course of time? So I thought when I went through this presentation, it actually neatly breaks down into the first bit being full of loads of words, the second bit being full of loads of numbers, and the third bit being full of loads of pictures, so it gets easier. Here we go. Okay, so are employees emotionally committed to their finances? This is the numbers bit. So very conscious of the fact that there's both Kim and Luke to come, and we will both be discussing various angles on commitment, and there are about 1 million different papers and presentations that talk about behavioural aspects. I've gone very light on this section, you'll be glad to know. So what I did was I looked at some research that's recently been done by a company called Neighbour, which is called the DNA of Financial Wellbeing. It's a really very interesting survey. They talked to 10,000 employees of various different companies in the UK and 500 HR directors to get both sides of the picture as to how people felt about their money and their relationship to the workplace. And I pulled out some not very uplifting stats, I have to say, from it, but quite interesting. They said a third of them said they felt stressed due to money worries, and 24% had actually lost sleep worrying about their money. Now, you could argue that that is certainly a form of being emotionally involved. You don't lose sleep worrying about something that you're not emotionally involved with, even if it's quite a challenging and slightly, dare I say, negative statistic to look at. Ultimately, what it also means is that there are a lot of people that are struggling with the here and now. One of the other interesting things that looks a bit of an outlier on this is that 40% had no or limited understanding of credit scores. So what, you might think, but really, understanding your credit score is the best indicator you have of how your finances are doing and how other people are perceiving your finances. And worrying 25%, and actually when you look at the 18 to 24 age group, it goes up to 48%, had an income that fluctuated by 10% or more each month. So when you look at that as a background for trying to get people to make long-term commitments to their savings, it's tough. They're struggling with the here and now, but that's not to say that they're not emotionally involved with their finances. So Neighbour also asked what workplace benefits were most valued by employees. So right there at the top across all the age groups, and by the way I've kind of just selected age groups out here, they did ask people between the age of 24 and 25 and 44. But you can see even down at the lowest end, 61% valued it, up here 73, 71% valued it. They also, for reference, value flexible working and physical health benefits. And this is quite interesting. Up here, they were also asked how many of them actually had access to that, had that access to that benefit. So we're very near the end of staging for auto-enrolment, so with 67% thinking that they've got access to a pension. Well, what's happening to the other 33%? Some of those are clearly going to have a pension and not actually know about it. So there's an interesting communication point with this. So the other thing about workplace benefits is it does take two to tango. This is not just about what the employees want and value, because that could be a pony or a unicorn. Would you like a pony or a unicorn? Sorry.
I was just going to ask, was pension the workplace benefit people valued the most?
Yes, it was. Yes, across the board. Yeah, all age groups, all genders. Yeah. Employees have got to be committed to delivering it. So I also pulled out some research that the REBA, the Reward and Employee Benefits Association, did around pensions priorities and drivers. So when you look at employers, those where the HR director is responsible for managing the pension, those are their top 5 drivers. So engaging employees right at the top of it. When you go to companies where finance director is in charge of the pension, engaging employees is there, but it's way down the list below government legislation and cost containment. And I think the bigger question around this is that from the employer's point of view, there's a cultural consideration as well. Employees can be as engaged as you like, but if it's not there for them to respond to, they're not going to be able to get involved as much as they'd like. So, very, very quick dig down into small detail. Some research we did with Pensions Insight recently showed that employers do want pensions to work for their employees. Acting in members' best interest was by far their biggest governance priority. But when it came to actually communicating what was going on in the scheme, when we asked if you wanted to engage your workers, what information would you use? Fund performance was by far the largest measure, and you can understand that. People want to know how well their pension is performing. But things like scheme quality, way down the list at 18%. So you can see that there's some tricks perhaps being missed here in trying to get people involved with their scheme, other than fund performance. And then when we asked them if they'd ever actually tried to engage the workforce using the above, just over half had a go at that. So again, there's far more that employers themselves could be doing about communicating their schemes. So that was the first point. Are people committed to their financial futures? Yes, they are, but they've got the here and now to deal with, and employers need to tango too. Second question, do employees care about their financial future? So here is a brief history of the need for pensions engagement. This is the Dulux version of the history of pensions engagement. The Farrow and Ball one is... But, I suppose the point I'm getting to here is that if you consider this to be the early 1980s, this is about 1986, Financial Services Act, for the most part, people were either in DB schemes or sadly they had no pension at all. Either way, the need for them to actually be engaged with it, relatively low. As you come up here, let's say this is kind of 2006-ish, we had A-Day, something like that, the simplification confused things a bit, and people needed to start paying attention a little bit more. Down here, 2011, 2012, two things happen. Auto-enrolment starts to kick in, so in theory you've got many more people that are involved in a pension that can engage with that pension, but you've also got defined benefit schemes dying away. So the need for people to actually get involved, to actually start to engage, starts to intensify around here. I'd say this is probably around about where you get freedom and choice. Now we're getting seriously into some deep colours. People really do need to understand, because this is choices they are having to make at 55 and onwards, and whatever they do beforehand leads up to that. So now, engagement's getting really important. I'm kind of saying this is probably about 2020 over here, and I think if we haven't had beforehand, we'll start to get some, whatever happens with the omni shambles of what's going on politically at the moment, somebody is going to review state pension ages. Somebody is going to actually take some action on it. And by then, people really do need to be heavily engaged with their pension. So, I just want to very briefly touch on this, because it's all very well saying that yes, people need to be engaged with their pensions. Yes, that's very important. But how do you actually get people to be interested in their pensions when they've got struggles with fluctuating income, they're not really understanding their credit scores, or the rest of it? And I'd like to very briefly introduce you to the ripple effect. So this is actually an educational tool created, not in this form, this is a bit more psychedelic, by a guy called Phil Race, who came up with an adult education model that said there's actually kind of ripples around how people learn in different ways. There's actually 7 different ripples that sit there, but sitting right in the middle there are 2 really important factors. And what I'd like to do is some audience participation at this stage by picking on you and asking you to name me something that you do really well.
Well, let me think. Put me on the spot here. My job.
Your job. Why do you do your job really well?
Because I'm good at what I do.
Okay. And how did you become good at what you do?
Experience.
Okay. Name me something you're not very good at.
That's a lot easier. So I am not very good at. Oh man, actually, that is quite difficult.
Because you're good at everything.
I'm just a bit average at everything. Okay, so I'm not very good at cycling. I could be a lot better.
Okay, why are you not very good at cycling?
Because I don't train enough.
Right, okay, good. There's no more picking on people, by the way. So, what we're coming to is the reason why you're good at your job, why you enjoy your job. The reason why you're not very good at cycling is mostly because you either want or you need to be good at those things. You want to be good at your job, you enjoy it, you probably don't need to be very good at cycling. And if you did, you'd get good at cycling.
Okay.
So it's finding those points where want and need sit right at the middle of the ripple effect that actually get people to start committing to learning. Now this is an education tool, it's not an engagement tool, but you can see the similarities there. You can see that if you get somebody interested in learning about their pensions and about their finances, that's probably want and need. Very hard to create with financial education, but if you look at particular points, like when somebody joins a company, when there's a life change, something like that, you can find those little points of want and need, where you can get in there and actually make some difference. So, does this all translate into more pension savings? And I've talked for too long, so I'll do this very quickly, as we're already into the pictures bit, so this is good. We're very, very bad at looking ahead. That ties in a little bit to that want and need. But we looked at some research by 2 people, the School of Life and Like Minds, a communication agency, and they looked at how far in advance people would generally be involved in what they're doing and how they treat their finances. And 2 things came out. One's not rocket science, the other is more interesting. They found that people deal well with the here and now. They deal okay with the foreseeable future. They deal not very well at all with the unforeseeable future, which for a lot of people is retirement. The closer you get to retirement, the more interested you tend to become in your pension, because the more engaged you are and the more you can see the need for it over time. So there is undoubtedly a challenge, and I'm sure Luke will talk about this more, about getting to different age groups and getting everyone interested in their way. The other thing they found, which is more interesting, is that people who tended to have habits, shall we say, in other ways, so if they exercised regularly, if they tended to watch what they eat and eat healthily, tended to make regular pension payments more. So perhaps there's a thing about habits and actually getting people into habits, or helping them to look at something that they do already in a habitual way and apply that to finance, that helps them to get that little bit better at looking at the head of their future. And this is pretty much my last slide, so let's go. That talks about balancing priorities. That brings the whole thing together. You've got people who are too much struggling with the here and now, but they do care about their finances. They can be made if you find those points of need, want and need, and balance it up against other things, that you can get people engaged with the right messages. And there's another slightly interesting point. I quite like this quote, although I wasn't quite sure how to knit it into everything else. And I think the answer is perhaps there's still a little bit of an image problem with pensions. once. Where bed and breakfast used to serve up images of tired homes in sorry towns, Airbnb has turned the concept into one of adventure, and we need to do the same for money and pensions. And when we say the we there, we're talking about schemes, we're talking about employers, and we're talking about individuals as well. It's everyone coming together to improve engagement. Thanks for listening. Over to you, Kim.